Um, Today I have the pleasure of facilitating our next panel discussion, See Her, Be Her. And they will tell you how to be her. I have 4 exceptional cyber leader guest panelists. Maybe I should call them cyber warriors because they really are warriors. These women are formidable role models for all women who are in this field or who are contemplating pursuing a career in cyber. They know what it's like to overcome the barriers to success, and they will share their story with you today. The challenges they face and what it takes to overcome them and succeed. I feel so privileged to have this opportunity to engage them in what their challenges were and what they've done to be able to not just survive, but really conquer their career. So let me start by introducing Jenny Doe, Chief Security Officer at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Welcome, Jenny. Where are you, Jenny?
I'm here. I'm just unmuting myself.
Okay, let's see.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you. We also have Allison Atkins, Vice President of Cyber at Scotiabank. Welcome, Allison. Are you there, Allison? I know she's there, but where? She's lost in cyberspace somewhere. All right. We'll move on to our third panelist, which is Priya Servani, Global Information Security Officer at Fira Capital. Welcome, Priya.
Hey, Christine, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's so great to have you, Priya. And our fourth panelist is Julia Scouten, Senior Manager, Cybersecurity Services at KPMG. And she's also co-VP of Public Sector Relations for DND and Canadian Armed Forces Women in Defense Security. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, pleasure. It's so great to have you here with us, and I know you're very busy women. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So let's get started. As women in cyber, what were the greatest challenges or obstacles you've had to face with, and how did you deal with that? I'm going to start with Priya. Could you share that with us?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. Yeah, I think, I mean, we've all kind of, I think just not women, everybody goes through challenges in their life, but we just have a little bit of a little extra there, right? So just to give you a little bit of a background of myself, I have been through 3 countries. I kind of studied in India, did my first job there, then moved to Dubai, did a couple more jobs there, and then have landed here in Canada and have been a few jobs here too in leadership roles. So it's a journey over a couple decades that I've been in security. Started at the turn of the century. Now, obviously, the security field has evolved over a period of time in these last 20 years. Where we stand today is a much better place, where it's kind of security's got a seat on the table, in the boardroom as well. But that wasn't the case 20 years back. So I think that itself was one of the first obstacles where you would just not, security wasn't important enough, in itself as a domain. And then coming from a woman, it obviously becomes less important for people. So, to just be able to sort of battle that, and also being underrepresented, right? Because even now we're talking about these numbers being low, but at the time there were just handful. Like I've done my bachelor's in statistics. So I was in a class of 30 with just 2 girls. I've done my master's in computer applications. Less than 1/3 of the class was girls. And then I've been, when I did my CISSP in 2000, I was told I was the first female actually across Middle East to do that. So that again was, when I used to go in conferences in a room of 300, you would just be two. I would be like one or perhaps two or three more with me, right? So it's always that number of being underrepresented or not being taken seriously. I think that just always has played over the years, more in the early years when you're a little bit more junior. But I think in terms of coping with it, you almost learn through that, this is what you need to change. And this is where you need to be doing better, being a good role model for others to sort of follow. So that just meant that, a few things that I had as part of my work ethic was just to have solid work ethic, be professional, take a no nonsense approach to things, because that's where you kind of come across as, you mean business and not just here for fun. I think that makes it a lot more easy for people to take you seriously and kind of give you the credibility. And then to your point, some of those hard skills that we needed to gain earlier to do some certifications were key. Soft skills, as Christine, you shared, were like the big ones across the journey. You kind of go through these to learn and, see people around, irrespective, because there weren't many women, but there were, of course, there were successful men that you could look at and say, okay, what makes them successful, right? So all in all, I think, it's just being learning through your own journey and kind of improvising at every stage that has helped me kind of reach where I am today.
Thank you for sharing that, Priya. A true pioneer in your field. And it's always more challenging when you are. Jenny, I'd like to hear what you have to say with respect to some of the challenges, and obstacles. Yeah.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Priya. I can relate to a lot of the things that Priya was talking about. The other dimension is I'm a mom, I'm female, I'm also a visible minority. And I think some of the challenges and struggles were associated with things that I couldn't control or that I didn't want to. Like, I want to be a mother. I didn't want that to be a choice. And in those cases, I think what helped, I was told by a VP of a global firm, I remember at one point asking for accommodation. They wanted me to work on a file. It was 6 weeks of travel. I had 4 children at the time, two who were under the age of 2. And I said, well, I'd like some accommodation to work more remotely versus being on site all the time. And the VP, who had 4 children of his own, responded in email, I get it. I have 4 kids. What is she doing working, let alone working for this firm?
So unbelievable.
Exactly. And I couldn't believe that occurred in my lifetime. Like, I could get it in my mom's lifetime, but
exactly
to me, that was, and it didn't end very well for me with that firm. However, the message that I have to say is my ability to get over it and to move on, right? Like, there will be challenges, and to recognize that, and to have the self-confidence, which I think is also another challenge for a lot of us women, is having the self-confidence to say, no, that's not right. I'm not willing to accept this, and to speak with our feet, and to have the courage to do so, because it's not always obvious when you need the income, and there are times where and you have to gauge, are you going to suck it up, or are you going to say something? And I found those moments, I think, the most difficult, and I still struggle, but I believe, and I continue to work on, having the courage and using the soft skills to impart the message, not abruptly, but tactfully.
So important to have our voice heard. And especially something like that, that really is shocking in today's climate to hear that. You're right. Heard that, when my mom was breaking in, or some of my mentors. So having the courage to speak up is really important. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. Julia, would you like to share some of your challenges and obstacles you were faced with?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Jenny and Priya, for sharing your experiences. I really, really connect and can relate to exactly what you said. So my experience, I was reading a Forbes article a few years ago, and it mentioned that only 10% of cybersecurity are represented by women in the industry, and that there's a problem in retaining them because of burnout, lack of career advancement, and of course, industry culture. I then really thought to myself, I'm like, what? How could that be, right? Like, cyber is so interesting. Why would anyone want to leave it? And then it dawned on me that pretty much all the men in my industry had surpassed me, and a lot of my female colleagues had actually left cybersecurity altogether. And then I really started to look at why that was. So I'll give you an example a few years ago of a colleague I had who was an acting manager for a highly technical operational team. So she didn't have a technical background or even one in cyber, but she was well organized, had great analytical skills, and amazing leadership qualities. She was decisive, confident, and very capable to lead that team. And when her time was up to act as the manager, she then had to compete for the position. And guess what? She didn't win it. She wasn't successful. And it was because she wasn't considered technical enough. So after that, she obviously left our team. She left our department completely and left cybersecurity behind. And then I actually had a conversation with her and I asked, like, what happened? And she said that she felt her non-technical skills would never be valued in this industry. That devastated me at the time, and it still really bothers me all these years later. And I've also faced the same scrutiny. Like, I've also been told I was too technical for some jobs and not technical for others. And it's always been a challenge to justify my skill set and wonder if I was good enough. But I'll tell you, the most influential person in my career has a PhD in English. I learned more from her, like primarily on how to communicate business impact and risk than any other course I've ever taken in my entire career. And I personally think that we need more people like her. So how I'm trying to overcome this challenge is I am working really hard on finishing my MBA. I'm trying to take on more leadership positions to gain experience and to really seek out roles where I could finally be on the other side of the hiring table and say to someone that your skills are needed, your skills are valued, and we need more people like you. So I think in order to tackle the issues within cybersecurity, we need a whole range of skill sets and backgrounds, and there's plenty of room for everyone.
Absolutely. And tenacity, that served you well. You never quit.
That's true.
Good for you, Julia.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Allison, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Fantastic. Okay, good. I have the headset here, and I think it's probably a fortuitous stroke of luck that my microphone wasn't working earlier, because I was singing happy birthday quite loudly and quite badly.
Thank you, Allison.
So I think I was saved on that one. But happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think my greatest challenge or obstacle has been not looking the part, and facing subconscious bias in the role and being scrutinized and judged. And I think for many of us, I think we've had to be just that little bit sharper with our knowledge and our nomenclature, and just that little bit crisper on the facts, because we were facing the judgment. And I think, there's an assumption that you don't know what you're talking about, or an assumption that you don't have the appropriate background. And so I think, maybe that kind of adversity has made us all stronger, right? So our mountain to climb was just that little bit higher. I'd like to pat my colleagues on the back for that. But I will share a short story as well that I think Julia reminded me of when I was in the UK and I applied. I was contacted by a recruiter for an outside role, and I decided to give it a go. And I was waiting for the interview, and the person who was interviewed before me walked out, and it was someone that I knew, someone at the same organization that I was at, also applying. So sort of like, hey, gotcha, we shared that secret. And I was surprised that he was applying. It was a technical role, and he was a business guy, right? And anyway, long story short, he was offered the role and I was not. And the reason given to me was that it required a deeper technical background, and that he just was more technical. And he was not technical. He wouldn't have referred to himself that way. It wasn't part of his background. It wouldn't have been on his resume. He was someone from a business background that sort of fell into an IT security risk versus, me, where I'd had the cybersecurity experience, the, computer science background, pen testing. And so, clearly the recruiter, the interviewer really wasn't listening to what I was saying, wasn't reading what was on my resume, and nor were they looking at his. They were just seeing that it was a guy and making assumptions, right? And so, I was fine not to get the job, but to be told I didn't get it because I was the less technical candidate, that just didn't sit right,
I completely understand. When I first joined in my career, I was involved in printing, and I had come first in terms of my class, in terms of the exam, the interview, but they chose to give that to a man because I didn't have ink under my nails, and it wasn't even to run a press. So, we've been fighting this battle for so long, and it's like, when are we going to stop? So the courage, that you demonstrated, just like Julia, the tenacity, to stay with it. I really admire that. So thank you for sharing that with us, Allison. We talked about competencies in the different panels. I talked about it. Now I'd like to get your perspective. So let's start with Priya. What are the competencies or skills you think are most critical for women in pursuing a career in this field? Priya?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you covered a good lot, Christine, in your session just prior to this, right? Like the top 5 and then the 3 that you kind of narrowed down. Communication is the key, problem solving, teamwork, I think has been big. What I attribute to myself in terms of really, what has, besides all of these that are there is, I think one is just being assertive while being collaborative and empathetic about the business and the people there, right? So I think, as we just all talked about the tenacity or the challenges we've been through, we just needed to be a little bit more there. And it's interesting when they say that when a man is kind of assertive, it's seen as confidence or as like a strong person, versus if a woman does that, it's seen as being aggressive or ambitious or, like those. So it's just that you need to be there and yet be, in a way that you just don't kind of stand out like that. I think, so, being very, very collaborative, I think that's fundamental for all human beings. Unless you work well in a team, I don't think you can ever succeed anywhere. And same way, if you don't care for the other person, being empathetic, you would never be able to kind of succeed beyond a point. I mean, you might just be successful in initial roles. So that I think was one big one. And I guess the other part that I keep, myself very, very, I take pride on is continuous learning, because this domain of security is just so fast evolving. Like you just have to keep running to just be where you are, right? And that just means not just in technical sense, but also in business sense, in terms of the way the business is evolving and how you can sort of support that. And of course, this constant learning of how the world's changing and how you as a person can evolve to sort of be more successful, be more impactful in where you are. So those, I think that you can just never take away, whether it's cyber or whatever field, as long as you keep yourself to that level. There's very, I mean, I have, at least in my experience, felt there are very, very good chances that you would succeed. You know, you'll have initial hiccups like we've all talked about our journey, but you know, we're all now at a stage where we can take pride of being through that because of some of these that we bring in. So,
Exactly. Well, thank you for sharing that. Jenny, what are some of the skills or competencies, you know, that you felt were most critical for you in terms of pursuing your career?
I was quite fortunate in my career to have benefited from coaching. And one of the first, and actually several times in my career, and continue to, either through mentoring. And the one advice that was given to me by one mentor was seek to understand before being understood. And it was this notion of communication first is about listening. And like observing, understanding the dynamics, really truly trying to understand, you know, either reticence or concerns. And that has been, I would see, and it continues to be a key competency that I share with my teammates. Yes, of course, you're going to have the technical skill sets. Yes, continue to develop all of those, but they're useless unless someone is willing to listen and to take them in. But in order for them to do that, you need to listen to them first. So that's a big one that took me a while, and I still work on. But it is one that was a big competency that I espouse and advocate a lot for.
It's a good one to seek to be to understand before you're understood, you know, to know where they're coming from. That's a great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us. Julia, what competencies or skill you think are most critical right now for women, and what served you well in terms of those competencies?
Sure. So the number one skill that has helped me more than anything in this field is actually the skill of networking. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's like, it's easy to say networking, but I'm going to break it down for you, okay? Or as best as I possibly can. So what I've learned that it's important to build your brand, be authentic, foster your network, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Cybersecurity is a small community in Canada, but a very, very powerful one. So I'm going to give you a quick example. I'm currently mentoring someone out west who's releasing from the military, and he was looking for a career change. So he was considering cybersecurity, but he really wanted to speak to someone about it first. Now, anyone that knows me well knows that I love what I do. And it's really easy for me to convince someone to join our field, right? But it was also just as important that he speak to other people to get a a bigger perspective. So what I did was I posted something on LinkedIn asking my network what advice and guidance they would give to someone who was considering a career in cybersecurity. And it was simple enough, but the responses were amazing. Within 24 hours, he had numerous peers reach out to him, offering to speak with him, giving him advice on what school he should attend, even what programs, and what type of jobs would be available. A few even offered to hire him once he graduated. Suddenly his calendar was full of meetings from people all over Canada. And I was just so proud to be part of this community. And the next time I spoke with him, he told me if this is what the community was like, then he's in. So I'm happy to say that he will be starting next fall at BCIT out west for the Industrial Network Cybersecurity Program. Yeah, super excited. So that's just an example of how powerful this network can be, right? But it has taken me years to build it, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But what has consistently worked for me is that when meeting with others, like what Jenny said, listen more than speak, right? Try to connect with them on a personal level by finding common interest and follow up with that person. This is a skill set I've had to work really hard at getting better at, and I've only been able to do it by practicing. And I also try to give back, and that's why I volunteer at WIDS, which is Women in Defense and Security. So I'm trying to give back to my community and my network as well. And to expand on that, I think it's really important as women that it's even more critical that we connect together and help one another achieve goals to positively contribute to attracting and, of course, retaining more women in cybersecurity.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Networking is so important.
Yeah.
And you know, it wasn't raised a lot in my discussions with the CISOs, but I'm really glad that you mentioned that because it is an important skill set to have. And like any skill set, you have to work at it to perfect it. So thank you for sharing that. Allison, what are some of the skill sets that have helped you in your career?
I think, you know, just thinking back to early on for me personally, I think getting some credentials was important, not because, you know, they certainly don't compete with real experience, but I think for me, it was just something that helped me have more confidence. So it was, you know, I've earned my stripes. I can demonstrate to the world, here's some independent verification that I do, you know, I know what I'm talking about, right? So that meant a lot to me, more in terms of just that confidence that it gave me, I think. You know, but as my career's progressed, I see so much more value in the soft skills, and I think you know, curiosity is really important. So seeking out information, asking you know, questions, insightful questions, and really trying to understand resilience. You know, I think we've all now shared some stories where we've had some setbacks or been knocked down. We got to get up again, right? So that resilience and the passion and commitment to keep moving forward. Bravery, you know, I think we've got to be courageous. We need to be brave and find our voice and not be afraid to speak when we're the only woman in the room, right? I still today find myself very often the only female around a table of, you know, sometimes up to, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 men. Jenny's nodding. I'm sure that's what her world is like too, right? But you know, we've got to have that courage, and I think you know, I was going to say listening to hear and speaking to be heard, and I think it's very similar to what Jenny had shared. I think, you know, it does start with listening and treating our colleagues with respect, right? Because I think we get respect when we respect others, and you know, we may be keen to get our ideas out there and you get them on the table, but we still have to, you know, be respectful and make sure that we're not, you know, talking over folks or interrupting because we're feeling small or whatnot, right? I think it's really important for us to listen and make sure that we're being very thoughtful. Negotiation and influencing skills, I think, have been really critical in the types of roles that I've been in, and I've learned that, you know, sometimes a win comes from, it means accepting some compromise, right? So I think, you know, as sometimes we feel as females that that's an uphill struggle and we need to have this ferocity and you know, keep fighting for the point, but the win can actually have a little bit of compromise, and you still have to see the greater picture, right? That you're on the right path or your initiative's moving forward, even if it doesn't look exactly as you first hoped, right?
Okay, thank you for sharing that. My last question to the panel is, what career advice served you best in this field, and what would you recommend to women today to be successful in cyber? And because I have you on, Allison, I'm going to ask you to answer that first.
Don't let fear hold you back, right? So, you know, don't be afraid to apply for a role, even if it doesn't look, you know, like the perfect fit, or, you know, don't be intimidated. You know, we have to get out of our comfort zone and step up for opportunities. But you know, in doing so, I think it's very important to be true to ourselves, right? Because you know, authenticity is truly important. And you know, I early in my career, I felt maybe I needed to try to fit in and be one of the guys, right? And that was the way to succeed, but that never works. You really have to be yourself, and and find the rapport that you can with your colleagues. But I think not giving power to our excuses, not sometimes maybe we're getting in our own way, assuming there is a bias there, or assuming that we're not going to get a chance, and we can't give into that, and then most of all, I would say that the advice would be support your fellow female colleagues. Us women, we need to support other
Each
women,
other,
right?
yes.
We've got to support each other. This is not an exclusive club that some of us have made it into, and we're trying to, be the only one. It's not a turf territorial thing. I think we're stronger together if we, if we pull each other along.
Great advice. Thank you, Allison,
Welcome.
for that. Jenny, what advice would you give to be successful in this field?
I'm going to share an advice that was shared with me. One of my very first bosses, and I think it's a boss that I've shared with Allison and Darren, told me very young in my career, you are the CEO of You Incorporated. And as the CEO of You Incorporated, you need to make the decisions that best suit You Incorporated. And what that did for me was kind of take that third party dimension, out of it. It's like, oh, wait a second. It wasn't this question of kind of expecting it to happen to me by some miracle. It was really this, no, I'm accountable. I'm in charge. And as the CEO, I can decide what I want my organization to look like. And it was such an empowering advice that I still use and that I continue to share with all my staff and with anyone I've had the pleasure of coaching. And it's one that follows me, has followed me. I think I got in my 20s, and that I still continue to use. And don't ask me how old I am now.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Julia, what advice has served you well?
Similar to what Allison said, actually. So I noticed an interesting statistic a while back that said men will apply for a job when they meet 60% of the qualifications, as where women will only apply when they meet 100%. like why? It is true. I've done it. Okay,
true.
We lack such confidence going after the roles we know deep down we're qualified for, right? I've certainly done that, right? I've hesitated to even apply for jobs until I'm like, yeah, I can tick every box. Anyways, years ago, I had a director who told me, get really good at applying for jobs so that when your dream job comes up, you're ready. And that's my advice to others. Get really good at it. Get really good at the application process, communicating your skills, and the value that you bring to a role, and to always seek feedback, right? So I want to share with you an example. All of you know I currently work at KPMG, right? But what you may not know is that I just started about 6 weeks ago. I actually came from the federal government, and that's where I work for. Yeah, I was there for like 21 years. Anyways, the point is I applied for this job right before Christmas, and the job poster stated that they were looking for a manager or a senior manager. And I was writing up my application as a manager. But I remembered that statistic, and at the very last second, I changed everything to senior manager. And I thought, what's the worst that can happen, right? They won't hire me, and I'll at least find out what competencies I need to be a senior manager, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what happened. What happened instead was that I got a call back right away, followed by an interview and then an offer. And that leap of faith is what led me to where I am today. And I'm so glad I made that final change. So yeah, thank you. So
great advice.
Yeah, take that leap of faith, have confidence that you're qualified, get used to applying for jobs and getting that feedback, ask for that feedback. And for every job that I've been offered, I've probably, see, I got people calling me. Okay. For every job I've been offered, I must have applied to 5 that I didn't get. So just keep at it.
It's a numbers game, right?
It is, really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
And last but not least, Priya, we only have a few minutes. What advice would you share and what has served you well?
I think, you know, everything that Jenny, Allison, and Julia said, you know, are very, very relevant. So I'll just sum it up pretty much in what I always believe in and I share. It's be you, believe in you, and do what you love to do. I think if you are just to the point Allison raised, you know, if you're authentic and if you just bring yourself fully into your work and, you know, be just yourself and similarly believe in yourself, right? To the point that Julia raised, right? You just don't wait for being 100%, just take it. And then the last one I think is very critical for everything again, it's do what you love to do. It's not because cyber is hip or cyber is most paid job these days or whatever that drives you to cyber or any other domain. I think it's very, very important that you are happy with what you're doing because that's where you succeed and that's where you bring yourself that credibility that others see in you. So that just would be, you know, like do at least just that kind of summarizes everything that we've all said.
Absolutely. If you do something you love, you will always excel. You should always work in your area of strength. So thank you, ladies. Thank you, Allison, Jenny, Priya, Julia, for joining us on this panel. See her, be her, sharing your experience, advice, and your great insights on what it takes to be successful in cyber. Thank you, ladies.